Kia ora and welcome to another video. This is episode, I think, 7, if I count correctly, of a series aimed at teaching you how to play Riftbound step by step, hopefully getting you confident enough to play at your first Nexus night and beyond. For today, much like last time, we're going to be playing some of the new Vendetta legends and play with some of the new cards and get some experience in what that looks like. For today, we're going to be playing a game of Mel, Matriarch of War. There we go. Matriarch of War. When you empower something else, empower me. I become empowered if I'm not already. We covered empowerment last episode, as well as briefly flow, but we will be visiting both of those consistently much more. Disempower me, and also pay 1 power and exhaust the Ambessa legend in order to ready another unit. This, I feel like, from the outset, doesn't feel intensely powerful, especially when you match it up against things such as Relia's Legend. But I can understand how, as a byproduct of already doing a lot of empowerments, you're essentially just paying a power in order to ready a unit. It's actually not a high cost overall. It's just with the lack of experience with empowerment, it seems a bit heavy, but we'll get there. The chosen champion is Ambessa the Wolf. It has a 3 energy, 1 orange power cost for empowerment, and when they are empowered, I have +3 might and can't be dealt damage unless I'm in combat. This is really interesting because it essentially means that she can't be taken out unless she's in combat. And with cards such as Challenge and Marching Orders, there's a whole playstyle I can see where you keep Ambessa in the back line and you just kind of force the opponent to live with the fact that this is impossible to deal with unless they rebuke it back to hand, or they have another way of getting it back out of the, or bring it forward, such as Charm. But with Body, that's also not a guarantee. Now, if we move on to the opponent, we have Nasus, Curator of the Sands, as the chosen legend. They are a green-blue, so we don't have any new combinations like we did have last time. He has the ability, when you play a unit, gear, or activated ability energy cost, that with energy cost of 7 or more energy, you may exhaust me to ready up 2 runes. Now, this is playing really interestingly into a might-heavy playstyle, or unfortunately, Vanguard Armory is yellow, so it's not like you can pair this with a Vanguard Armory-esque style, but it really plays into having some really, really expensive abilities or units. Now, the chosen champion is Nasus Ascended. Has the Deflect 2 payment, so very, very nice. Is an 8 energy, 1 power, so immediately fits the criteria for this, but is also a very late game. And has a further 8 energy empowerment, where if they're empowered, when I conquer, you score a point. In other words, you conquer, you score a point. Well, if this is empowered, you get 2 points. So that's why it's so expensive. Now if I show the opening hands, and we start with the Ambessa, our new card for the day is Kale Justified. They have a 3 energy, 3 might, empower 3 energy. I can be powered up to 3 times, and I have +2 for each time I'm empowered. Now this is really fascinating because this goes against the whole archetype of it's empowered or it's not. As we can see here, I become empowered if I'm not already. It almost says that you can empower something multiple times, but is that to say that it is a stacking, or is that to say it is a one and done, a concurrent? With this wording, it sounds as if though Kale Justified can or is an exception to the rule, and you need to have a counter on it. But at the same time, it could be, in consideration of Matriarch of War, this could be a great dynamic of you could have multiple empowerments stacking on a single unit, and in this manner, it means that you don't have to be empowering on a strategy focus such as like, oh, I don't want to empower this turn because it means I don't get an extra stack on Matriarch of War. So we'll see what it says. We don't have any information on what Empower actually is. As you can see here, Nasus has the thing where he can pay out energy to power, use only if not empowered. So maybe there's some limitations, and otherwise you can empower infinitely. On the Nasus side, in their opening hand, we can see the exact same card twice. Their name is Steel Paws. They are a 1 energy 0 might, so a very, very cheap unit, with Deflect 1, and it says, Empower 7. When they are empowered, they have 7 might. Now, once again, that empower cost feeds into this really nicely, so it seems like that's going to be a pretty strong standard in the Nasus deck, to be seen, however. But it is also the second ever unit to have a 1 energy cost. The first is Determined Sentry from Unleashed, which is a body card. But without further ado, we're actually going to see the Nasus tap 2 runes and play out both of theirs, because, well, what else have they got to do? They will pass, and it is now the Ambessa's turn, where for 3, they're going to play out Kale Justified. And pass. Simple as that. There is nothing exciting happening currently. The Nasus is for 4 runes, going to play a Deadly Flourish, targeting the Kale Justified. Deadly Flourish deals 3 damage to an enemy unit. Unfortunately, there is no way for this to save itself, which means that not only does the unit die, but the Nasus also gets a gold for their worries. The last thing that they will do is they will move one of their Steel Paws up to this battlefield and conquer 2-1. They could move both of them up, but this doesn't really provide the same benefit, whereas if we wait until we have 6 runes, we may be able to play something else out extra. And also because we have no way to protect either of these units, we don't want to leave ourselves open on both fronts. Now, the Risen Altar obviously would actually reduce this empowerment down to 6, but we actually like the 7 for the Nasus, so if this stays alive until then, good on us. It is now the Ambessa's turn, and they draw a new card, that being the other Ambessa, Respected and Feared. 5 energy, 5 might. Empower for 1 energy, 2 order runes. If they are empowered, they have +2 assault, and also, when I attack, kill an enemy unit here with less might than me. This is a really fascinating card. This plays really strongly into what Nasus wants to do. If the Ambessa can have that +2 might, they go to 7. You have cards like this that, yeah, they're at 7, but it's like they just have to reduce it by 1 to kill it for free. And at the moment, it's a free kill. But the Ambessa is going to go and say, you know what, I see what you're doing here, but I'm going to tap 5, recycle 1, and play Rengar Trophy Hunter, an unleashed card that you can play to battlefields that an enemy unit has it, and kill. The Steel Paws will die, the Ambessa will go to 1, and they will pass with all runes down. We can see here that the Nasus drew Deadly Flourish, and they have a Scuttle Crab. What they could look to do if they were really desperate is they could actually use the Discipline on the Steel Paws to increase its might to 2, and then Deadly Flourish dealing 3 damage, and hope that they get away to, well actually, and then Bella's Breath to deal 1 damage as well, and go for a trade, but then they'd be burning 3 cards out of their hand to kill 1 unit. When, in reality, all they could actually end up doing is just move over here, score to 2, play 2 to play a Scuttle Crab. On play, they draw 1. They draw a new card called Astral Heron. 7 might, 7 energy. When you play your first card each turn, if I'm at a battlefield, your next card costs 2 energy, 2 power less. Interesting. That's really strong. That is incredibly strong. That is a really, really cool card. But for the Nasus, they will pass, and it is Rengar's turn where they will score to 2. They have not drawn a new card, so they've got their whole shebang as per usual. The Ambessa, I'm just thinking about right now because they haven't had any empowered triggers. Empower seems to be something that we saw, I think, a handful of times in the last game, in the Akali versus Mel, and in this one we're just not seeing the same thing again. But what we are going to see is a tap 2 for a blood money on the Steel Paws, which is just if a unit has 2 or less might, it can kill, and if it was a friendly unit, they can draw 2 gold instead of 1 gold, but the Steel Paws will now die, and the Ambessa will, with their last 4 runes, play out their chosen champion, because it is non-powered, it can be chosen with a spell. And they will pass. It is now the Nasus's turn. They have 1 unit to their name, and they'll get a point for the Scuttle Crab. And they have 8 runes. Now they've got a few options. That they could play out this Nasus, which would actually then it costs 1 power. They can pay with the gold, and they can actually channel 2 runes that way. And next turn they'll be at 12. But they don't have the Steel Paws anymore, which really sucks for them. But the point was kind of worth the sacrifice. Or the other thing they could do is play out Astral Heron and just do it that way. And I think that's what they'll do, is they'll tap 7 to play out the Astral Heron, 2 base. And they will now, because they have played that card, they'll be able to exhaust their Nasus and play 2 runes exhausted to for the fact that the unit cost more than 7 or more. And the last thing they'll do with 1 energy and 1 power is nothing. They're just going to say, hey, look, you're probably going to be able to kill my Skull Crab. I'm not going to risk that. I'm just going to pass. The Ambessa will go up to 3 points. They drew another one of their chosen champion, which is pretty cool because it means they don't have to stress too much about potentially losing this one. And as such, they are actually going to spend 3 energy and 1 power in order to empower this Ambessa. Oh, let's see, can you stack those? Oh, you can, perfect. So you can see here that it already has built in a way for you to stack empowerment. Now, because the Ambessa is empowered, it has +3 might innately. And when it moves in here, it will score a point and be able to trigger Sunken Temple for 1 energy, draw 1. They will now draw a Swell Scout and play that over here, bring the Rengar back to base. And they're actually thinking, do you want to bring the Ambessa away from this battlefield? And yes, so we'll exhaust, recycle 1 to bring the Ambessa back to ready it. And then from the ready, they'll move it back to base. And with the last 2 runes, they're just going to play out an Honest Broker to the Resident Altar as well. Now, it's worth noting that while this does give -1 energy or power, because it was not at that battlefield, it does not get the bonus, which I think is a fair trade-off. Now they're going to pass their turn, and it is now the Nasus' turn, and they draw White Flame Protector. Now, White Flame Protector was a massively popular card during Origins, because when you played Master Yi, it was a late game unit that just meant you could walk through any defense. A +8 on another unit is phenomenal. And with its cost being 2 power and the Nasus making 2 power, it's actually just an 8 energy, which is really cool. But we are going to see that the Nasus is going to begin by moving the Astral Heron to the Sunken Temple and exhausting 1 rune to draw and conquer. They draw a Find Your Center, and the Astral Heron is at a battlefield, which means when I play my first card each turn, it'll actually cost 2 energy, 2 power less, which means this is actually just a 6. But the Curator of the Sands doesn't say how much you spent, it just looks to how much it costed. This is very similar to the Defy that I was talking about previously, where if you have a card that costs more than 4, but you reduce its energy cost through things such as this, it doesn't look for how much you spent, it looks for how much it's written for. So this would still trigger the Curator of Sands and only cost 6. Which is quite fascinating. And so for 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we'll bring out the White Flame Protector. We can now trigger the Curator of Sands, but we have no runes to float, and would technically do this, but I don't have much interest in it just yet, and as such, I'm not going to float the 2 power. Instead, I'm going to give my Scuttle Crab 8 might this turn, and swing that massive Scuttle Crab into the base, a battlefield where for the Ambessa they will die, or both units will die, and they'll get a gold and a rune exhausted for their troubles. And the Nasus will score up to 5 for that. And with 5 runes remaining, they're actually looking to play Find Your Center. It'll cost 3 because the Ambessa is not within 3 victory points. So it will cost 3. But it is a draw 1, which is quite nice. But at the same time, we could just hold on to these 5 runes and have available to ourselves 2 disciplines and a single trigger of Bellows Breath, and I think that's what we'll do. The Scuttle Crab will go back down to 0 might and will pass. It is now the Ambessa's turn, and they draw another Kale Justified. It is really interesting to note also that Empowerment isn't a single turn activity. You can actually do it multiple times in a single turn. And as such, we're actually going to see now that the Ambessa it's at 7. It cannot be empowered again because it has the limitation on it. But we could play out this Ambessa and then empower it and then trigger this for another power in order to create this into a 7 might and then give it a buff with Pit Rookie, which would make it an 8 might, which means when it swings into the Astral Heron, when they attack, kill an enemy unit with less might than me, it would actually kill it outright, and I think that's the play. So for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll play out the Ambessa Respected and Feared. Then for a 2, we'll play Pit Rookie, targeting the Ambessa Respected but Feared with a buff, increasing its might to 6. And then for 1 energy and 2 yellow recycle, that will now be empowered, which automatically also gives Matriarch of War empowerment, which means that Ambessa will now have +2 might on assault. And then for 1 orange power, or actually not 1 orange power, for the gold that we have, we're going to exhaust the Matriarch of War in order to ready the Ambessa, move it into the battlefield on combat, and moves up to 8, and it is going to trigger its attack ability. Now, it is an ability that can be reacted to, because all abilities can be reacted to at reaction speed. So, thankfully for the Nasus, they're going to go, cool, you know what? Discipline. You don't have more might than me anymore, because my Astral Heron is a 9. And I will draw a card, and that will resolve. Which means that the Ambessa Legend unit ability will no longer trigger, and that fizzles, and it is an 8 against a 9. And it's not looking very good for the Ambessa. They still do have Facebreaker to get themselves out of a sticky situation. And that's kind of all they have available to them. Facebreaker is a card from Origins that says stun a friendly unit and an enemy unit at the same battlefield. They don't deal combat damage this turn, hence the stun. So for their last 2 runes, they will play Facebreaker, targeting their Ambessa and the Astral Heron. And the Nasus is going to go, that's really cool, but I counter that. I defy that. You are not playing that card. Your Ambessa is dying this turn. And unfortunately, that is exactly what will happen. The Ambessa got a bit too greedy, and the Nasus will walk away the victor. That +2 will remain. The Astral Heron will take 8 damage, but it will heal as it is the end of combat. The Ambessa has no more runes available to them. The best they can do is they can swing over here and kill the Scuttle Crab, going to 5. With the death of the Scuttle Crab, it has the death knell. Choose an opponent, they reveal their hand, and you get to look at all the face down cards this turn and gain 1 experience. So for the Nasus, they will be getting 1 experience this turn, and they can now look at the Nasus's hand and see that there's another Ambessa the Wolf and a Kale Justified. They already know that there's one of these on the board, and they've seen the previous, so they know kind of what they can do to kill it. The Ambessa will pass their turn. They know they cannot do anything else. The Nasus will score to 6 points. They're at 12 runes, and they draw a Watcher. Watcher is a unit that says give an enemy units -3 to a minimum of 1 this turn, and that's pretty strong, but we're not too worried. Astral Heron will mean that the next card we do play costs 2 energy and 2 power less, but it's also worth noting that that energy cost is only in consideration to the printed card cost. The additional, or optional in this case, Accelerate, cannot be included. So while this is a 7 energy 1 power with an additional energy and power bringing it to 8 energy and 2 power for it to become an accelerated, you can only reduce it by 2 energy and 2 power on its written cost, which means it will still require you to pay the additional power for accelerate. You cannot neglect it. but it's worth noting. For 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we will actually be bringing out Nasus Ascended, which we covered earlier, but that will be played to base. And for the last 6 remaining runes, we're just going to pause on it. We're going to say, hey, look, it worked so well last time. Actually, we can do something. Now that the Ambessa has at 5 points, we can actually, for 1 rune, play Find Your Center because they're within 3 points of victory. So we can draw 1 card and channel 1 rune, but we're not too worried about the channel 1 rune. And we draw a charm! Oh, it just gets better and better for us every day. So what we are going to do is we are going to move our White Flame Protector into this battlefield. The Ambessa is out of rune, so that means the Rangar will die. The Ambessa will go to 7 points, and they're going to say, hey look, I am going to pay 1 green, recycle 1 green in order to play Charm, targeting your Ambessa, the wolf, because it is not in combat. It cannot be dealt damage, but too bad, I am bringing it into combat. It is going to fight me at this battlefield, your 7 to my 8. And you know what, just to rub salt in the wound, I am going to, for 2 runes, discipline myself up to 10 and draw an additional card this turn. And the Ambessa, the wolf, will die. That is the way the cookie crumbles. Now with 2 runes remaining, the Ambessa, the Nasus is pretty comfortable with where they are. They've got a Nasus Ascended in base, but they're going to go, I don't want to risk it in case you have something phenomenal. Actually, no, I am going to risk it in case you have something phenomenal. I am going to, for my last 2 runes, play out and recycle to a Bellows Breath on repeat for 2 energy, 2 power, killing this Pit Rookie. The Pit Rookie will disappear as it has 2 might, and this deals 1 damage to up to 3 units. And they'll pass. They'll say, hey look, I'm tapped out, but if you can't clear 7 and 8 might of that unit, you're screwed. The Ambessa probably can't, but we'll see. So for 3, they're going to bring out Ambessa the Wolf. And then for 3 more, and a recycle 1, they're going to empower it. And because we empowered, we get to use Matriarch of War, and we're going to recycle that in order to tap the Matriarch of War in order to ready Ambessa the Wolf. Then for 1 orange recycle, we're going to look at the opponent's hand, and we're going to see, oh yeah, well I've only got 1 option to get rid of, so I guess that's going away. Sorry, goes into the bottom of the deck, and that will resolve. Now, they've only got 1 card available to them, and this can't be empowered multiple times, so in some ways, it would have possibly been better to bring this out and empower it twice, because we would have had access to the runes for it, but that would have just put it up to 7 as well, so there's no real winning to this unless we had a way to empower this 3 times to give it ganking, and then a +1 anyway. So unfortunately for this Ambessa, it does look like a game 1 loss. And we'll be moving on to the next game, but we won't do any sideboarding per se. I don't think I'm comfortable enough with the current cards to say whether or not a sideboard is good or not. The Ambessa is going to choose to go first, and they're going to quickly sweep through the mulligan stage. Yep, cool. It is now the Ambessa's turn, and we see a new card from it, Gangplank Naval. Gangplank is a 6 energy, 6 might unit that has empowered 2 energy, or 2 power. It cannot be stacked, and it says, if a spell or ability that chooses me would stun me, give me negative might, such as Smokescreen, give me minus might, or return me to hand, give me +3 instead. It is essentially a you cannot get rid of me without killing me card. It is pretty impressive. On the Nasus' side, nothing new. So for 2 runes, we'll be playing out an Irresistible Feyfolk and passing. It is now the Nasus' turn, and for 2 runes, they're going to be playing out a Scuttlecrab to draw 1 and pass. The Ambessa will be moving over to Starspring. They have the trigger, when I move to a battlefield, you may move an enemy unit to that battlefield. They'll be moving the Scuttlecrab to this battlefield, and a showdown will begin. Now, the Ambessa has 4 runes, but they have nothing that really interacts with this battlefield per se, so they'll pass. And this Scuttlecrab, it is now the Nasus' turn, and at reaction speed, they're going to tap 1, to retreat their Scuttle Crab. Now, retreat is an Origins card that says return a friendly unit to its owner's hand and channel 1 rune exhausted. And that is exactly what happened. The Scuttle Crab returned to the hand free at last from the death of the one-nighter Irresistible Feyfolk. And it's now Ambessa's turn. They're going to tap forward to play out their chosen champion and pass. It is now the Nasus's turn. They are at 6 runes. They are going to tap 1, 2 of them to play out a Scuttle Crab, and then they're going to tap 4 of them to play a Deadly Flourish, getting rid of that Irresistible Feyfolk. I forgot to give the Ambessa a turn point. And the Ambessa's going to say, well, that sucks, but yeah, that's dead. And the Nasus gets a gold for their warriors. Now, of course, they played a Scuttle Crab, so they get to draw one. That's on me. And they draw Vilemore. Now, Vilemore is an unleashed card that is essentially, no, I'm bigger. It says that you cannot deal combat damage if the enemy unit has less might than me. It is a really strong hold unit because it essentially blocks a large number of available options for the opponent unless they can build a big enough unit or find a way to remove this from the battlefield. But keep in mind, green has defies, it has disciplines, there's always ways for them to bolster that terrifying front they have. But for now, we will see a pass and over to Ambessa, who is going to now move over to Starspring, scoring 2-2. They are pretty happy with how things have gone, and as such, they're going to tap 6 to bring out Gangplank to this battlefield. They're then going to trigger the Starspring for playing a non-token unit and move the Ambessa back to base. They're then going to recycle 2 runes in order to empower the Gangplank, giving him the ability that he cannot be targeted with spells or abilities that stun, give negative might, or return them to hand. Because they empowered, the Matriarch of War gets empowerment, but they're not going to trigger it just yet because they don't want to go that far down on the runes. And they're going to pass. It is now the Nasus's turn. They have 8 runes to their name, which is pretty good, especially when you consider the fact that Vilemore is an ambush unit, which means this little Scuttle Crab could move into this battlefield and say, how do you do? You do nothing. However, that would completely tap them out. That's not great. That's not what they want to do. Yes, they would be able to channel 2 runes exhausted, and so that 8 recycled 2 is actually just an 8. It's not really what they want to do. They're not leading too far behind. In fact, if they just move over to this battlefield, they would be able to score, but they would have to recycle 1 of the runes at the end of the world, but they'd at least go to 1. They're not too worried. If they were especially worried, they could move over to this battlefield and double discipline going up to 4 and hope that they draw a 3rd discipline somehow, but I think at the moment they're pretty happy with how things are looking. And they're going to say, look, the Ambessa's going to go up to 6 runes next turn. If they have a Rangar that goes up to 6, congratulations. It still means they're going to be short-handed by 2 might in order to get over this Vilemore. They're going to have 1 rune, which would be a punch first. So that would require them to have a Rangar in hand and a punch first in hand in order to defeat the Vilemore at this battlefield, which is, it's pretty strong. Is it worth it? Kind of. I think at the moment, though, we need to take the gamble. We don't actually have to take the gamble. Another part of me is just saying, move to this battlefield. Recycle the 1 rune, float the 1 energy, play out the Astral Heron, and then you'd have 1 energy to play a Defy if they have a spell that you don't really like, and the Rangar would still be required to get a +2 might from something. And from what we saw last game, they don't even run most things that bolster might. They run a Pit Rookie, which gives +1 might. So, in my head, as the Nasus, I'd be really concerned about Hidden Blade, and I would be concerned about Punch First and a Rangar. So, at the moment, those are not my concerns. I'm going to move over here. I'm going to float 1 energy and recycle 1 rune. And I'm going to tap 7 to play out an Astral Heron to this base. I'm then going to play exhaust my Curator of the Sands to play 2 runes exhausted. And I'm going to pass, and I'm going to say I go to 1 point. What do you do? The Ambessa will go to 3, and they draw a new card called Rampage. It's a 3 energy spell. As you play this, you may pay 1 energy as an additional cost. No, sorry, 1 orange power. Choose a friendly unit and an enemy unit. If you paid the additional cost, give the friendly unit +2 this turn. They deal equal to their mights 2. They deal damage equal to the mights 2. Sorry, I had a moment of can't read. In other words, we could give this Ambessa Empower, and then we can play this for 3 and pay the additional cost. This would mean that Ambessa would go up to 7 might for the empowerment, and then the +2 would put her up to 9 might, and then she could throw that against the Astral Heron. That's pretty strong. But we also know that the green deck has 1 rune sitting, and that's cheaper than a what's the word? A Defy. That's the one. I'm looking at it right now. But we can't. The way we could get around that is by playing Sabotage and be able to look at the opponent's hand and say, do you have Defy? Because if you have Defy, you need to spend Defy to stop me from looking at your hand and remove Defy. And if you don't have Defy, well, I still get a look at your hand. But we can't play Sabotage and empower this and play Rampage. Because this alone is 6, and we have 6 here. We need 7 to do this. Don't do the thing. What I'm thinking instead is we'll go, you know what? Nah, we're happy. We are happy with where we are. We tap 3, and we play a Kale. Cool. And Kale's whole thing is, I'm going to pay another 3. I'm going to empower myself. And you know what? Give Matriarch another stack as well. Oh no, can't have another stack. Never mind. Whole thing about maybe that's where it comes from. No, that's where it is. I'm just going to have a single stack of Empower, which means that I'm up to a 5 now. And you need to be aware that I'm going to make this into a 9. And next turn, I'll throw a Rampage out to be able to kill this. But for now, I'm not worried. I'm going to pass with my 3 points, and I'm going to see what you can do. The Nasus scores up to 2, because keep in mind, the opponent did not see Thousand Tail Watcher last turn. Or last game. So they don't know there's any Accelerate cards coming out of this Nasus's deck. They haven't seen the Vilemore, they haven't seen the Thousand Tail Watcher, they just know about Deadly Flourish, the Defies, the Scuttlecrabs, the Disciplines, the Nasus, and the Steel Paws. Now for the Nasus's turn, they are going to... they already got the point for the turn. They're going to tap 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the gold gear. Oh, actually, no, and 1 green in order to play out the chosen champion. Its reduced cost is for that, so technically we don't need to recycle those 2, but I did anyway because the Nasus Curator of the Sands trigger would give me draw 2 anyway. That comes to base. With our remaining 5 runes, we will then tap 2 to play out the Scuttlecrab to draw 1. Why did I do it in that order? It's because if I did the Scuttlecrab first, he would have received the -2 energy, and it seems a little more wasteful on such a unit as that. But it's technically a free card if you did it that way. Then we actually see we draw out a Zonya's Hourglass, which we're not going to tap turns. So we have 3 runes remaining. We're going to recycle the gold in order to hide a Zonya's at this battlefield. It is hidden. I will hide it. I'll show it's got hidden with the fortification on it. And the last thing that we'll do is when we move the Scuttlecrab back. And the reason for that is, while yes, we want the Scuttlecrab to die, we don't want the Scuttlecrab to die, causing us to trigger the Zonyas. While we can keep the Zonyas hidden, if there was a way for them to push Astral Heron out of the battlefield without killing it, and then kill the Scuttlecrab, we would have to trigger Zonya's Hourglass, which means that we would save the Scuttlecrab. But there is actually an interesting mechanic with the Death Knell, which will allow us to reveal the hidden on the Death Knell rather than the death itself. Hindsight's 2020, but it's interesting to know about. But that's why we've chosen to do it in this order, and we pass. We say, you know what, I'm at 2, you can go up to 4. I don't mind. I'd like to see what you do. And the Ambessa is going to respond with, me too. I'd like to see what you do, because I'm going to pay 1 recycle 1 to sabotage you And the Nasus is going to respond by saying, yeah, you kind of know I have to do it. I'm going to defy that sabotage so you don't see what's in my hand. You don't know if I have another defy, but you know I have one less. The Ambessa is going to say, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to tap 3 in order to empower my Kale again, giving them another +2. And then I'm going to play another sabotage. I want to see what's in your hand this time. They are going to see 2 disciplines and a Vilemore and a 1,000-Tail Watcher, so they know the accelerate unit now exists. But the 1,000-Tail Watcher's -3 does not work on this. Actually, it would work because it is not choosing the unit, so it would actually receive the -3. Fun fact. But they choose to get rid of a discipline, and that will resolve. With the last 3 runes remaining, they are going to play and pay 1 orange. They are going to empower, use the optional cost, and use the Kale, and target the Astral Heron. Now this will give the +2 for the additional cost has been paid. And they will smack their 9 might into the 7 might. This will resolve, and on the play of the rampage, because it's a slow speed, which means a reaction speed can be responded to it, they will reveal the Zhonya's Hourglass, meaning that will die instead, and the Astral Heron is just returned to base, exhausted. They will have, however, dealt damage to each other, which means the Kale is taken 7 damage, you can see as I have highlighted it here, which means it has 2 health. The alternative way this could have gone is that, and in hindsight this should have been the way it goes, is that the discipline is played to increase its might by 2, and means they would have traded, but the Astral Heron would have survived. But beggars can't be choosers. The Kale will move into here, healing itself, recycling 1 rune for the Conquer ability on the Sigil of the Storm, getting a point, and that will bring the Gangplank back. Now they will also pay an additional power and the Ambessa Matriarch of War to ready a unit and bring the Kale back to base, because they'd rather just keep them both alive, but they really want the points to pressure this Nasus into a really awkward situation. The Nasus drew a Deadly Flourish, which is 3 might, but this Kale is now very much so out of range of that. But for 12 runes, they've got a few options available to them. They're going to choose to move the Scuttle Crab over to the Star Spring, conquering 2/3, and they're going to choose to not move the Scuttle Crab. They're going to pay 8 and empower the Nasus, so it means that they score an additional point when they conquer. They are now going to move to this battlefield. There is no response from the Ambessa at this stage. They recycle 1 for the cost of the Sigil of the Storm, and they score 2 points. All of a sudden, tied game. Behind by 3, now even. It's impressive how quickly a powerful empowerment like this can swing the tides. It is worth noting that it is requiring you to have played or activated the ability, then trigger. It needs to be added onto the stack as you use the runes, rather than because I have done it this turn I can do this. It is a reflexive trigger, so I can't now return this 1 rune I got. I have to pay for the Sigil of the Storm. For the last 4 runes, they are going to move an Astral Heron to the Star Spring and a Scuttle Crab to the Sigil of Storm, giving a nice even 8 might over here and 7 might over here with a 0/0. And we will pass. It is now the Ambessa's turn, and we can say they draw a Rengar Trophy Hunter for 6. The Ambessa is going to open by tapping 3 runes to empower the Kale once again, putting her up to 9. And keep in mind that the Ambessa knows about the Discipline, the Vilemore, and the 1,000-Tail Watcher. So they know they have the runes required for Discipline, which means at any stage, this is actually a pretty big threat. But they also know the game is going to 8 points, not 7 points, so it's not like the Ambessa can win next turn, because this is on Conquer, not on Defend. Or Hold, I should say. So they don't have to fight this turn. But it's probably in their best interest, because all they have to do is they actually have to just push in with the Nasus alone onto a single battlefield and they can win next turn. Which, when paired with Thousand Tail Watcher, is very, very easy to do. So they've got to really hope that they can do something else this turn, but I don't think they can. Not easily, at least. The best they can do is they can tap 2 to play a Pit Rookie. Technically, the Matriarch of War should be empowered as well, giving the Kale up to 10, and they'll move into this battlefield. And they'll say, here is my 10 might, I have deflect 3, and I have ganking. You have a Scuttle Crab and an Astral Heron. What do you want to do? And it's worth noting that technically it is the first card that the opponent, the Nasus, would play this turn, and so if this was at action speed or reaction speed, they could play this for 2 energy and they can play this technically free. So that's what they're going to do, is they're going to say, hey look, I'm going to gamble. I know that you've got ganking on this, but there's a hope, actually, no there isn't, we don't care. We're going to go, cool, let it die. Because if we do the empowerment of the +2 on this, they will not trade. This will heal and it'll go back to 10, and then they can ready it up with the Matriarch of War, gank it over, and clear this battlefield. We need to, at minimum, trade. At most, win. So, that is exactly what we're going to do. The Astral Heron and the Scuttle Crab die. The Scuttle Crab lets them look at all cards in their hand, and they see, yep, you've got 2 ambush units here. That's pretty terrifying. The Matriarch of War is going to ready up the Kale and bring it over to here, and that is when, for 2 runes, they're going to play the Discipline onto the Nasus and draw 1 and resolve. They unfortunately drew another Astral Heron, but that's okay, it's not the end of the world, but it does mean that it is going to be a trade of the Nasus and the Scuttle Crab for the Kale. That did lose its thing. I did pay the... Yes, I did pay for the empowerment ready of that. They did not conquer at the Sigil of the Storm, but they did conquer at the Star Spring, so they will now move their Gangplank into the Sigil of the Storm, going to 7 points. And they're just going to pass. They're going to say, look, I don't need to win via hold. Oh my goodness, the next card was Discipline. That would have made the difference. But they do say, you kind of do. So for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, recycle 1, and recycle 2, Thousand Tail Watcher comes out ready. The Gangplank is at 3, the Ambessa is at 1, and the Pit Rookie is at 1. For the because the Ambessa is not empowered, for 4 runes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, before that, we're going to trigger Curio of Sands and bring those 2 runes exhausted back. We're going to play for 4 a Deadly Flourish on the Ambessa the Wolf. It is not empowered, so it will die, and the Nasus will create a gold. The Thousand Tail Watch will move it here, and the Gangplank will die, and the Nasus will go up to 6, recycle 1 rune for the cost of the Sigil of the Storm, and they will pass and they'll say, hey look, I've done as best I can. I hope you have something. And unfortunately, while there are things that the Ambessa can do, it's not the prettiest. The problem here is that the Ambessa can move this Pit Rookie to this battlefield and score a point. And they can play this Rengar, move this battlefield, and fight here, because they can do it on ambush. But the problem is this is 6 and this is 7, and the only way that they could kill this Thousand Tail Watcher and conquer is with Hidden Blade, but they can't empower a unit for Ambessa Matriarch of Water ready in order to bring out, let's say, this for 4, this for 2, that's your 6, you move the Pit Rookie into here and you move the Ambessa. The best they can do this time is they can Hidden Blade this Thousand Tail Watcher, move into this battlefield, and hope that they don't have a way to get rid of the Pit Rookie and have the Ambessa played onto this battlefield as well. And that's exactly what's going to have to happen, is they're going to move to this battlefield, they're going to draw for the conquer. We're going to see it's actually an Ambessa respected and feared, which is pretty terrifying. but it doesn't make the difference, especially since the Assault is only on attack. So for 2 runes, recycle 1, they're going to hit and blade the Thousand Tail Watcher because they don't want them to go up to 7 points. The Thousand Tail Watcher will die, but they get to draw 2 for that. Now for 4 more, they play an Ambessa to this battlefield, the wolf, and they pass and they say, hey look, this is now a battle of attrition. It is a fight to the end. And unfortunately for the Ambessa, the Nasus with the Hidden Blade drew 2 really nice cards. Firstly, they're going to tap 1 and a recycle 1 to charm the Ambessa the Wolf back to base. Now you might be wondering, well, why would they do that? It's because they don't want the Ambessa to hold. And the Ambessa conquering does not draw 2, but the Ambessa holding does. The next thing they do is they tap 4 to play out a Deadly Flourish, killing the Pit Rookie. And make a gold. Now with their last 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they play out Natural Heron. And they channel 1 rune Exhausted for the Curator of Sands. And they pass and they say, hey look, I've got nothing. I am at dire straits. But I've got a hope. For the Ambessa, they are going to tap 3, recycle 1 to empower. They are going to move the Ambessa to the Star Spring and draw for the turn. They drew a Pit Rookie that was perfect. They needed a card that was cheap. They tap 2 to bring out the Pit Rookie. They buff the Ambessa for consistency. Then they recycle 1, exhaust the Ambessa Matriarch to ready the Pit Rookie. Pit Rookie moves in here, and they scored at 8, and they win the game. From a legend ability that I wrote off at the very beginning, that was a really good showing. We've seen some really, really strong players come out of Nasus this turn, but unfortunately, it was the combination of the Nasus dying to a very, very large Gale that really struck a really bad end to that game. So unfortunately, the Nasus will die, and we will go to a game 3. We will see the final battlefields out of both players. The Nasus will choose to go first, and they are going to mulligan one card, and the Ambessa is going to hold. Opening hand for the Nasus, we see that they've drawn their signature spell for the first time this game, and it says, deal 4 damage to a unit at a battlefield. If you control 7 or more runes, deal 7 to it instead. When it dies this turn, channel 1 rune Exhausted. That's pretty terrifying. I like it. Unfortunately, the Nasus drew nothing and they must pass this turn. The Ambessa opens out with a Kale Justified and pass. It is now the Nasus's turn, and they once again draw a bit of a dud hand. They're going to tap 3 in order to play out a Find Your Center to channel 1 rune Exhausted and draw 1 card. And they finally find a unit through the Scuttle Crab, but they have to pass. It is now the Ambessa's turn. They'll be moving their Kale to this battlefield and drawing 1 for the turn. Then they will be tapping 3 in order to empower the Kale, empowering the Matriarch of War, giving the Kale 5. They are then going to tap 2 in order to play an Irresistible Faefolk to base and pass. It is now the Nasus' turn. They have 7 runes to their name. They can now, for 1, 2, 3, 4, play out Siphoning Strike. It would deal 4 damage, but because they control 7 runes, it actually deals 7, killing the Kale, and because it died, they will channel 1 rune Exhausted. The last thing they will do is they will tap 2 in order to play out Scuttle Crab to draw 1 card, and they will pass. It is now the Ambessa's turn. They will move their Irresistible Faefolk to this battlefield, and they will trigger the move ability, requesting the Scuttle Crab to come over here. The Scuttle Crab, unfortunately, will pass, it looks like. Actually, no. The Ambessa is going to pass priority, and for 1 rune and 1 energy, 1 power, they're going to use Bellows Breath to deal 1 damage to a unit, killing the Irresistible Faefolk. And because The Nasus was attacking this battlefield and now controls it. They get a point on the opponent's turn. That's terrifying. Love that for them. Probably not how they saw that going. But unfortunately for the Ambessa, they are going to tap 4 runes in order to play out the Ambessa, and then they're going to immediately tap 3, recycle 1 orange to empower it, giving it +3 and meaning that it cannot be targeted by enemy spells. It is now the Nasus' turn. They go to 2 points, and they will, for 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, recycle 1, play out their Nasus Legend, channel 2 runes exhausted for their Legend ability, and they'll pass. Well, actually, no, they won't pass because Windswept Holic allows units to have ganking, which means they can move over here to the paper tree, which says when you hold here, each player channels 1 rune exhausted, and they go to 3. They will now pass, and it is now the Ambessa's turn. The Ambessa will now move to the Windswept Hillock, going to 2. Then they will tap 3, playing First Mate, readying a friendly unit, or readying another unit, doesn't have to be friendly. You can see here when you play me ready a friendly unit, or another unit, and they'll move the Ambessa with ganking over this battlefield. The Scuttle Crab will die, allowing the Nasus to see the hand of the Ambessa and seeing especially 2 hidden blades, which can be countered by Defy, but we're only looking at 1 Defy at the moment. The Ambessa will now score to 3 points. The last thing they will do is they will tap 2 runes to play an Irresistible Fae Folk, and they will pass. It is now the Nasus' turn. They will tap 1 rune in order to play out a Steel Pause to base, and then they've got a few options here, but what they're thinking right now is for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're going to just kill the Irresistible Fae Folk. They don't like the fact that their units will be moved without their permission, you may say. That will resolve with the Irresistible Fae Folk dying and the gold being made for the Deadly Flourishes kill trigger. And the Nasus is going to go, hey, look, -1 to your Ambessa. The Superfy gives a unit -1 to a minimum of 1, which means the Ambessa goes down to 6, from 7, and they draw 1. They draw a second Defy. That's incredible. They now move their 8 Might Nasus into this battlefield. Keep in mind, they know about the double hidden blades, they know exactly what's in the hand, they know about the Facebreaker, but they know that the Ambessa is only at 3 runes, which means they have to choose. But the Ambessa also knows, hey look, they saw my hand. They know I have these, which means they most likely have a Defy. And that's exactly what happens. The Ambessa goes, I'm not going to take that risk. I know that you have a Defy, so I'm actually just going to tap these 2 and Facebreaker, because I'm not going to waste a hidden blade on a Defy. And the Nasus is going to respond by saying, yeah, no, I have a Defy. That will resolve by the Ambessa dying, and the Nasus, because they won that, will score to 4. Now, the Nasus says, hey look, your Irresistible Fae Folk were really annoying. They moved my units without my permission. I would never do that to you. But I'll also lie to you. Bring your First Mate over here right now. The First Mate will move into this battlefield, and immediately the First Mate will die. The Nasus, with their last remaining 4 runes, will tap 3, play a Find Your Center to draw 1 card and channel 1 rune exhausted, and they will pass, with just enough runes for another Defy. The Ambessa has drawn another Ambessa the Wolf, and for 4, they will play that. Then for 3 and an orange, they are going to empower that Ambessa, increasing its might to 7. They are then going to tap their last 3 runes in order to play out a First Mate, readying the Ambessa, moving it over to the Windswept Holics, going up to 4 points, and they're actually going to play it safe. They're going to say, no, I'm going to recycle 1 more rune, I'm going to exhaust and remove my empowerment to ready my Ambessa through Matriarch of War and bring it back to base. And we will pass. We'll say, no, I got what I wanted. I got a point. Sure, it cost me a 1 power here and a power and a 3 energy here, but I got what I wanted. The Nasus will hold, but they held the paper tree, which means each player now channels 1 rune exhausted. Doesn't really help the Nasus because they're at full runes, but it's okay. The Nasus will now move their Steel Paws over to this battlefield and score 2/6. And they're going to empower for 7. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need to bring back 2 more. Yep, I can't do math apparently. For 7, they're going to empower their Steel Paws, so it has 7 might. That's a pretty big kitty. It does count as a cat, and it's count as Piltover. Go you. And we're going to bring the Nasus back to base, because we don't really want to hold that. We just wanted to deter the opponent from holding, while we could do not much about it. And we're going to now pass. It is now the Ambessa's turn, and we see another new card. Cannon, Keeper of Balance. Now, I mentioned Cannon is the first yellow-purple, which makes him really interesting, because he has a lot of... it's chaos and order overlapping. Cannon has the availability where he can be hidden, and the hidden means he can be played at reaction speed later on as a unit. When you play me or I attack, you may pay 2 energy to stun a unit. While there's a stunned enemy unit here, I have +2. So he has a 2 might that you can pay additional 2 energy when he attacks, or when he is played from hidden, to stun a unit. It is worth noting that the play does not require you to play it to a battlefield, which means that you can play Cannon to base and then pay 2 to stun a unit at a battlefield where he is not currently residing. Pretty cool. It is now... That is exactly what the Ambessa is thinking. They're thinking, that is pretty cool. They're going to first move their first mate to the paper tree and score to 6. Then they're going to tap 3 in order to play a Cannon, Keeper of Balance, paying an additional 2 in order to stun the Steel Paws. The Steel Paws will now have a nice little stunned icon, meaning it is at 7 might, but it is not going to deal combat damage this turn. And the Ambessa's going to run in and go, hey look, my 7 against your 7, but your 7's just a big wall. I have a bulldozer. I am going to pass priority. The reason they're not going to kill it is because, well, they've got a stun on it. They don't really want to have to use the hidden blade if they can avoid it. If anything, they'd rather hidden blade their own first mate to get the draw 2 for themselves. The Nasus is going to respond with a Discipline, increasing the Steel Paws' might by +2, and they're going to draw 1 for the opponent. The Steel Paws is stunned, so it will not deal combat damage, but that means that the Ambessa will be returned back to base. Now, as I mentioned, they're going to tap to recycle 1 in order to play out a hidden blade on their first mate. And the Nasus has a really interesting option here. They can choose to defy this hidden blade to prevent a draw 2 for the Ambessa, or they can hold on to it and say, hey look, no, get your draw 2. The Nasus is in such a position where if they hold, they score to 7, and then they can use their Nasus to score to 8. Or they can defy this and consider the idea that maybe there's a second hidden blade, even though we know it exists. Let this die, empower the Nasus, and draw and score to 8 next turn with a single unit. So they've got options here. And if I was this Nasus, I'd say no. I do not want at this stage this player to get draw. So it's going to resolve, and the Ambessa's not going to get the draw 2. They're going to do it again, and they're going to target themselves. They're going to say, I really need this. Well, actually, they're not going to target themselves. They're going to target the Steel Paws and say, too bad, I guess I'm going to use the draw over there then. And the Steel Paws will die, and they will draw 2. That will now resolve, and unfortunately, that's all really the cookie crumbled. The Ambessa will pass. It is now the Nasus's turn, and for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, they will give the Nasus Empower and move it in, scoring 2 points. 1 for the Conquer and 1 for the Empower ability of the Nasus. This is a really good showing of kind of how the Ambessa had some really good cards, but they had a lot of cheap cards. They never saw their more expensive cards. They never saw their Rangars, they never saw their Rampages. They do run Grim Resolve, they never saw their Gangplanks. It's these kind of cards that would have made such a massive difference for them if they saw their bigger units that could have countered the Nasus and countered the Steel Paws a bit earlier on without having to have so much reliance on the first mates and the early loss of the Cal justified with the Siphoning Strike. It is just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes when it comes to an order body not getting the units you want, as we saw in Game 1 for them and in Game 2 for the Nasus. They didn't see some of the cards they really could have benefited from. Did we see any cards that we haven't seen out of this? I think we've seen every card from both decks, but I'll just double check. Yeah, so we saw every new card out of both of these decks, but it was just the way the cookie crumbles. It was a really fascinating show by both players on the capacity these new cards can really introduce and these new legends. One that I completely wrote off immediately, and another that I obviously was not utilizing as much because we were sitting at 12 constantly and not using it. So I would recommend for Nasus, he is going to want to build more expensive units and more expensive cards in his deck in order to really utilize that power creation, the rune ramp that comes with the legend. As for Ambessa, I think that deck was a very, very good showing of the possibilities that can come with such a deck. But I think at the same time, it is still early days, there's so much more that can come from this, and we could see more of the yellow and less of the orange really come through for such a deck as Ambessa, if they can find the right balance of empower versus just straight unit. Anyway, that is another video on the new set. I might do a video on Spirit Forge, or more specifically, Unleash, or more specifically, I'll cover a few new pieces such as going over floating energy and floating power, but we'll see. Anyway, that is everything from me, and I'll catch you guys next time.